Now move on to our next session, which is also part of the inauguration, our inaugural CEO panel. And I give over the floor to Arti Davis. You are the Vice President of Sweden-India Business Council, Senior Vice President, and also, I would say, a keen environmentalist and working with deep issues that connects both technology and empathy. Thank you, Arti.
Give me a thumbs up? Great. So ladies and gentlemen, roll your sleeves up because now we start the real hard talk. I would like to welcome to the stage, before we start, Anna Shinbang-Batra to join me.
Thank you.
We are joined, of course, by, I think the seats, key industrialists today to share the stage to talk about how we accelerate this green transition. We have with us Martin Lundstedt, CEO of Volvo Group, and of course co-chair of the Road Safety Group, a new group under the India-Sweden Business Leaders Roundtable. We have with us Peter Carlsson, CEO and founder of Northvolt, and Ms. Anna Shinbang-Batra right next to us. Anna is now back in business, focusing on green tech after her time in politics, party leader of the Moderate Party, and chairman and of the board of directors of the Swedish Space Corporation. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start today's discussion by throwing out a question to all of you, because last year we sat here with high ambition, high hopes, looking at COP26 as a time when industry and government would come together to take steps forward in accelerating our green transition. Today, we stand in the middle of crisis. Energy insecurity at home, a war on the borders, and we are in turmoil. Never before have we needed leadership like we need it today. And I would like to ask each one of you, focusing on green transition, how do we move forward? What should this leadership focus on? Anna, I'm actually going to start with you.
Now, thank you, Arati. Thanks for having me, and thanks to all of you who made it here, both physically and follow us online. Where do I see our online? I should look there. Yes, there are online colleagues. Welcome to all of you in both countries. First, let me thank the SIBC, of course, for doing this, and India Unlimited, because these are areas of cooperation that are so important, where I think business and politics need each other as well. I mean, the history of our business cooperation goes even further back than 75 years, even over 100 years, where I think one major point of this discussion is that business can actually drive politics ahead. Politics is often about dealing with the immediate crisis, immediate distribution of power, whereas business can actually move the goalposts a bit. Business can tell politics that this is actually happening. Strategic assets are moving from physical ownership of coal to control of knowledge and technology that moves around the world. And when you realize that, politics, I think and hope, will follow. You see that in both our countries, where political leaders also realize that we still only have one planet. However, the good news is, even in crisis, that technology is actually the tool that can enable us to move stronger from crisis. You see it in Peter Carlsson's business, you see it in Martin Lundstedt's business, you see it in business all around in several areas. I myself, I'm in space, green tech and solar, for example, to mention but a few. And there I think we can learn a lot from each other. Sweden comes from engineering legacy business to some extent, whereas the major Indian tech companies today have risen from maybe nothing even, conquering chaos, if you will, to quote a famous book about this. But if you make it to national level in Indian business, you are probably scalable around the world, and you can have an exchange between engineers and technology-driven businesses around the world, where we can both benefit.
Thank you so much. Very good takeaways. Technology as an enabler, and of course conquering the chaos. If you can make it in India, you can make it anywhere. Martin, I'm going to come to you for your thoughts on the question of where should we focus on in terms of leadership as we move forward in this critical time.
Thank you, Arati, and hello to both Peter and Anna. Great to see you. I wished really to be with you in Stockholm. It was not possible this time, but again, thanks for the invitation. I've been having the honor to participate a number of times before, and this time I think it's in particular important to continue to what Anna alluded to. I think what we have learned over the last 2.5, almost 3 years now is of course a lot. We are, as all of you know, a global company. We have operations in 190 countries, where of India, of course, is one of our major hubs, both for our Indian customers, but also when it comes to actually the global development. But I will come back to that later. And what we have learned so far is, I think that, I mean, of course, coming out from the pandemic, we have the terrible war, we have still unbalances in the supply chain systems, energy challenges, etc. And as a result of that, of course, the inflationary pressure. But what is more important, I think, moving forward, is that the response from society will be also causing pressure when it comes to cost inflation, etc., where, to Anna's point, technology, innovation, and cooperation will be key. Because we will see responses when it comes to health system with the learnings that we have done. We will see it in energy systems. We will see it in defense. We will see it in cyber. We will see it in resilience overall, actually. And there we really need to utilize the innovation power by cooperating in a number of very important fields. Where we operate, I mean, obviously logistics and infrastructure development is key to all of these areas where we need now to actually continue to develop. And I always say that, I mean, the need of transportation infrastructure will continue to increase. All the macro trends are there to support that, but it needs to be considerably, not only more, but considerably more sustainable, both when it comes to I mean, the fossil-free outcome of transportation, but also when it comes to circularity and preserving biodiversity. And I mean, that is what the leadership is all about now, to turn these challenges into opportunities. And the leadership will be about shared visions, because moving from this brown platform to a green platform requires joint efforts and coordinated efforts, because otherwise we'll be stuck in the chicken and egg situation. So shared vision, very strong leadership where actually the partnership piece of the leadership is key. Even big corporations like ourselves cannot do it alone, far from doing it alone. So we really need to cooperate in different shapes and forms. And that is a discussion I've had many times, both with Anna and Peter, actually. And that also requires transparency. That is the reason why we are very much in favor of course, the Paris Agreement and everything that we have to go up to there, but also supporting metrics that are increasing transparency, such as the science-based target initiatives. We are cooperating with all of our customers that are engaged in that, because what is our scope 3 is someone else's scope 1 and scope 2, etc. So increased transparency across the value chains, and that is a new leadership where not at least India will play a very important role for us as a major hub for innovation for all the digital layers that we're doing, but also Indian economy that is really blooming in terms of these areas that I will come back to later. So interesting times ahead.
Thank you, Martin. I think you make some key points, but I want to touch upon one thing you say, resilience, because we're all working together to reach that common objective, of course, but resilience becomes the underpin that we need to also achieve. And Peter, I'm going to end the inaugural panel first question with you. In terms of leadership, resilience, technology's enabler, and transparency, what do you see in the way forward?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for inviting me. And, you know, I'm up here in Skellefteå today, and, you know, sorry I couldn't be with you, but you know, with, you know, moving into a downturn, a tougher economy, you know, higher cost of capital, and a lot of more uncertainty, is obviously challenging, but it's also a, you know, an opportunity as a business leader. It forces you to really rethink what you're doing and what you're not doing, and it's also an opportunity to drive further change, because in times with uncertainty, where people are recognizing it is tougher time, it is also there is a stronger openness to accept change. And I think both from as business leaders as well as from political point, I think this is actually both a challenging time, but it's also an opportunity to both drive important reforms and if you look at Sweden, I think there is a necessity to really look at and drive strong reforms in the Swedish both power generation as well as power distribution, and to utilize this momentum to do necessary changes in permitting timelines, in focused investments, short term and long term. And when I say short term, continue building up capacity. And when I say long term, it's more infrastructure and longer term technology developments, but also as leaders to drive behaviors. The government and regulation have always been a strong driver of driving and supporting the development of the right behaviors as into the green transition. And what makes me really happy is that when I speak to the likes of Martin and others that are our customers, yes, there is a weakening in the order book, but at least what I hear is that the underlying demand for green solutions is actually going strong. It's not declining. It is older technologies that is seeing the steep decline, and it is the new greener technologies that is being advanced. So it also gives an opportunity to step forward and take stronger positions, that when we come out of this, we will actually come out stronger. And I think this is valid for Sweden. This is valid for India. But I think it's important to utilize this time to take these steps.
Thank you, and I think that's a great segue to my question to Martin, actually. And we talk about uncertainty. We talk about this time that we find ourselves in where we can nudge behavioral change. I think it's a great point that's made. This could be a time to pivot. And that's the question I bring to Martin in terms of Volvo, because of course the transport sector is one sector that continues to grow. Maybe year on year less than before, but continues to grow. And this can be seen to be at odds potentially with our green transition objectives. And I'd really like to ask you, as someone who is a leader in this field, how do you see the next steps, short-term, medium-term, long-term, to achieve that greening in the transport sector in lines with what we're hoping to achieve by 2030?
But first and foremost, obviously, what we see as a key dynamic in the market is that we as citizens and consumers, etc., we are more and more asking for this. In some cases, maybe not consistently enough yet, but the trend is there. And what is positive about that is actually that our customers, the transport companies and the infrastructure logistic companies, but also their customers in terms of big retailers, whatever, are really addressing these questions now when it comes to their CO2 footprint, where in many cases logistics and infrastructure stands for a large proportion of the CO2 footprint. And by addressing that, example, as I said, by science-based targets, it's getting a really good dynamic. What solutions shall we put in place to really abate this CO2 in the long run? And then you're coming to a number of, and because for us, 90% plus is actually scope 3, how our products are used around the globe. And then it's about, of course, the propulsion system. It's about battery electric vehicles. It's about fuel cell electric vehicles that are both based on the same modular platform, but with two different energy sources based on hydrogen and direct electricity. That is just two sides of the same coin, right? That is the electrification industry. But it's also about circularity, about all input materials. And the good news in this cooperation is, of course, that this will never stop. But this is a must win for our customers and customers. To Peter's point, this is accelerating. When we actually revealed our Q3 report, we did see how both orders and deliveries are now having triple figure increases from low levels, but now it's really accelerating. It will continue to do so for many years to come. The good news in this cooperation is that we have a very, very strong team, a global strong team in India that is driving this innovation. We have one of the absolute biggest R&D sites in India, and that is not that it used to be a traditional work package site where we had offshoring or capacity. They are running a number of global innovation work streams for the group when it comes to all these fields that I was talking about. We have it on digital and IT platforms, but we also have that with our customers and customers in India, because what we see a number of very important initiatives now happening in India. First and foremost, how the logistics in itself is developed with GST, with how I think it's 35, 40 kilometers per day of new highways built out, because that will create sustainability platforms. And what is also because the inefficiency in logistics system is actually causing a lot of unnecessary emissions, right? But also the national strategy for hydrogen, the pathway for renewable fuels, both when it comes to electricity and hydrogen, etc. And also when it comes to our global sourcing, maybe you have seen that we have, and Peter, you're well aware of that, obviously. I mean, we were the first customer when it comes to the fossil-free steel, also from northern Sweden. Now actually we have the green cast iron, that is also a big proportion for us. And the first green cast iron is coming out from our partners in India, thanks to our global sourcing team. So a lot on the agenda in logistics, much more sustainable. It is about emissions. It is about the input material. It's about safety. And to your point also, Arati, I'm very proud to co-share the safety work stream, but also as a co-founder, Volvo is extremely proud of CITES also, the Swedish India Transport Innovation and Safety Platform. This is a long-lasting tradition for Sweden. It's a long-lasting tradition for Volvo. If you close your eyes and think about Volvo, you think about safety, I think, and a lot of other cool stuff also, I hope. But also for India, because with all the digital capabilities that we are sitting on now, we see how that cooperation is really giving tangible outcomes. So I also would like to promote in terms of sustainable logistics, transport and society, safety as a key parameter for prosperity. So a lot of good things happening together, and we are firmly committed 2040, everything we are delivering globally, fossil-free solutions, because they last at least 10 years. And that means a considerable acceleration already during this decade in order to achieve those targets. So we are rolling up the sleeves and continue to work.
And that's great to hear. And of course, what comes out strongly is the market is also pushing for this. It's not so much a fight. It's not an upward struggle the way it might have been 10 years ago. And that, of course, creates a smooth transition. But it has to be balanced. And Peter, now I'm going to come to you for the next words, because you said on record about a year ago that what Europe needed was to get oil out of the system, to improve green inputs, to create balance in the system where batteries will provide a smooth transition. What we saw a few months ago now is the EU taking unprecedented steps to actually cull out fossil fuels from the system, improve energy efficiency, improve the inputs of green energy into the grid. What does this mean for Northvolt? And is the EU ready to make such a rapid pivot in a short time? What will it take?
Well, obviously, what it means is an enormous opportunity, and I want to point out, for us, we've put out a roadmap towards, we're starting with 16 gigawatt hours, which is representing roughly 300,000 vehicles, 250 to 300,000 vehicles up in Skellefteå, and that's what we're starting up. We set up a roadmap towards 150 gigawatt hours of supply within the end of this decade in Europe, and we're developing a game plan. And what we see is that both on the customer side as well as on the stakeholder side, with EU and governments is an increased effort in how can they help us enable the green transition with building out more capacity. There is a number of bottlenecks, and I would say probably the biggest bottleneck in near term is just the availability of competence in Europe in this area, and I think that's relevant for very many regions in this space. That probably Martin as well as I, we could, we would employ every skilled engineer in this field that we could find. So there is for sure going to be constraints. There is also a little bit that we haven't talked very much about when it comes to for a couple of years. Last year and the year before, I actually think Europe was the biggest investor in technology. There was more investments in Europe than in China, for example, in some of these renewable technologies and battery technologies. But 2 months ago, the Biden administration put this IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is, it's a massive package. And I don't think that Europe's have fully understood how massive this package is and how fast, in just like 2 months, the momentum have moved from Europe to North America. When I speak to a number of Asian companies, they're actually kind of reallocating investments from Europe to North America. Tesla in itself actually moved battery equipment from its Berlin factory to North America because of this enormous package that will catapult the US into the technology race, both on semiconductors as well as on green technology. So I think it's very, very important that Europe thinks about the response to this, because I think it's very, very important not to lose the momentum here. And to continue building out the ecosystem in terms of supply chains, in terms of competence, in terms of investments that is needed. But overall, the willingness and the drive is there. Then it is about the action plans to make it happen, and it's going to be interesting to see. Here in the coming year, how structured can Europe act, and how courageous can European leaders be?
Thank you, Peter. So I think the two responses we've had so far really set up the stage. We have a willingness from industry leaders to make the change. We have a demand from consumers to buy the change, but we have a red flag, which is government legislation in terms of how the change can be incentivized. And as our last input for the inauguration panel, and I'm going to come to you. You have the unique perspective of having a government perspective in terms of how we can answer this, as well as a business industry perspective. We are in a unique position when it comes to India and Sweden. As was mentioned earlier, in 2023, India will take the role of the G20. Sweden will take the role of the EU. We have many challenges ahead of us. How can we together create the incentives required and decisions on a roadmap to a green transition future?
Thank you, Artie, and thank you, Martin and Peter, for your points. I would like to add to them to quite some extent. As Sweden enters the chairmanship of the European Union, high up on the European agenda is reducing dependence on fossil fuels, reducing dependence on Russia, for example, also reducing dependence on China, actually. And here there are enormous opportunities in investing in a greener future in Europe, which is already happening to some extent, but Peter has a clear point in that the pace of this needs to increase. I think Sweden finds itself in quite a good position on the European stage in doing so. This is, after all, Greta Thunberg's hemland, home turf. This is a country of Northvolt, of Volvo, and several other countries, world famous for high-class technology. So we have all the opportunities to do so if politics and business work together. I would mention two areas where to do this. One is the energy system as such. Peter and I are both active in this. One of my investments is in Polarium, who works on improving the energy system, including battery and energy storage. Not least in India, as you roll out mobile technology and digital infrastructure, you will need energy production, where India can use the sun. More abundant in India than in Sweden, I must admit. And the more you can store the energy, the better you can use it over time, because even in India, the sun will go down every day. But you need a redundant energy system where renewable sources together with energy storage are key factors in order to build a more resilient energy system. This also brings us to circular economy. You see the transition in the transport sector, of course. Martin knows all about that. You see it in all sectors around. And if you look at, for example, agriculture, you see circular business evolving, driven by entrepreneurs. Because one thing entrepreneurs do, that Peter not least shows, is to always think outside the box. You find a problem or a crisis and you think, okay, how do we fix this as good as possible? Doing what no one has done before. That's what entrepreneurs do all the time, right? So when battery plants, for example, get residue products from their production in one part of the economy, and the political world is surrounded by war, crisis, disturbed trade flows, if they meet, if business and politics meet, you find examples such as one of my recent investments, Cinis Fertilizer, who take residue products, waste really from Peter's battery plants, and turn it into environmentally fertilizers, which is badly needed on European soil, physical European soil, where major parts of the fertilizer industry are dependent on fossil fuels and Russian fossil fuels, which we want to reduce. Now, no politician would have invented this. Politicians never invent, but what politicians can do is to realize that business is driving the green transition outside old boxes. And so when old boxes don't apply to this, for example, old energy systems, old institution central-driven energy systems built on fossil fuel, when they don't apply to this world, not well enough and not green enough, then business will develop new technology and already does so. If you look at hydrogen, solar wind, for example, small nuclear reactors, for example, business can actually provide fossil-free electricity for the world. Less than 2 hours of the solar energy that hits the Earth could actually deliver energy for the entire world for a year. If we only, And that's not a small thing, if we only use it better. That's what business can do, and what politics needs to do is really to lower thresholds for this. Energy has been about subsidies and central project. Now we know that the Swedish Energy Authority already has about 200 projects with India. Many thanks to you, Arati, for these. We know that technology is there, business is there, and the next step is that politics need to allow this to happen. In Sweden, in India, also in Europe, definitely, because the world needs it, and Europe could step up. But we have all the opportunities if we do it together with business.
Thank you so much, Anna. And of course, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here today. We are in crisis, but that is a chance for new opportunities, new solutions, and new actors to come to the table. But actors with us today, Northvolt, Volvo, and Anna Kinberg-Batra, we're all working together to create this change. Thank you so much for joining us for today's inauguration panel, and stay with us as we unbox the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.